think it's time to start.
Oh, perfect, thank you so much. Okay.
Dolores, I do need you. We have a tiny bit of business to handle. First of all, Happy Pie Day.
Happy Pie Day, everybody.
Do you realize what I'm talking about? It's March 14, 3.14.
Not pie like.
You didn't remember your math?
How could they forget?
No, I think she had me for a teacher, Doreen. Our little bit of business is that we have to announce the slate of officers and board members for next year. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't lobby to run, because our election is next meeting. But per our bylaws, we're supposed to announce a slate today. So I'm going to turn it over to our Vice President, Dolores, who will announce the slate of officers for next year. Remember, elections are next month.
And I came ill-prepared. So presently, we have our current officers holding office again, with one exception. President, of course, will be Gretchen. Vice President will be me. Secretary, Janet Winters. Our treasurer is going to be a job shared by two ladies, Char Taylor and
Lori
Cruz.
And we have board members.
Look at the party round. And who do we have for board members?
We have Judy O'Laughlin and
We know she's on the Land's Idol.
Terry
Landseidel and Siobhan Sladek.
Yes, got it.
Okay.
All right. So that is officially the nominations from our nominating committee. As they say, elections will be next month. There are a few things that I think, well, first of all, before I do that, I kind of want to bring you up to date. We have Mike back in the corner, who is diligently photographing the scrapbooks that are on loan from the Burton brothers, talking about the whole history of Tropical Mine. He has already done one scrapbook, and I think, have you finished this one, Mike?
A little more than halfway.
A little more than halfway through. As for those of you that don't know, Mike is the grad student from Johns Hopkins who is helping us with digital curation, because let's face it, in this day and age, we need things that are not with us, but out there so that everybody knows. And that's also true about your own family histories. I think most of you read in our last newsletter about that wonderful narrative that I received from Noel Deese's daughter, Nancy. I hope you read it. It's a whole history of the building where we had our December meeting, the Hamilton Hotel, which became Juanita's, which became the Players Club, which became other things. Well, I also, along with that narrative, got about 60 pictures. So I can hardly wait to have time to put that together, because it is a real find. We are also working with the Burtons at Tropical Mine. Mike and I are meeting with John Burton and his sister Wendy tomorrow up there, because we're also trying to get that whole thing wrapped up. So anyway, a lot is going on.
Wow.
Siobhan, I think you had a couple of things you wanted to say, so without further ado, here is Siobhan, our program chairman.
For those of you that read Facebook and stuff like that, Norma Gerber Cleet just was an amazing woman that I never met. And she was always on my to-do list. Tomorrow, always tomorrow. And she did a wonderful job of looking up local history, sharing those stories on Facebook, and she passed away last week, the day after her birthday. And I am just sick. I am sick for her husband and for all those that loved her. And Jim Muma also passed away this last week. And my purpose in saying these things is that we are not recording history like we should be. And everybody thinks, well, my story's not that important. And Tom Taylor, it is. We need to record these stories, and we would like to record them firsthand. So many of these things, like Jane Pinheiro, the opportunity to have a firsthand story has come and gone. So as you're reflecting on your own family history, if you'd say, hey, Siobhan, come have lunch with me, let's sit and poke around and see what kind of a story we could come up with. I would love to do that. We want your stories. They're vital, they're important, and there's a time when it becomes too late. So please, please, please get with me. So without further ado, whoops, I will let Gretchen continue to cough. And I will have her make the introductions tonight because she has firsthand personal knowledge. So here you go, Gretchen.
Well, we are really, really fortunate to have Margaret with us tonight. Right now is a very, very, very busy time for Margaret because she is the president of the Poppy Reserve Mojave Desert Interpretive Association, and the Poppy Reserve has been open since the 1st of March, and it's been rather challenging because we had to put in a whole nother point of sale system out there, which Margaret worked very hard to get up and running. None of us who volunteer out there are industry savvy or savvy at retail sales, but we're becoming a little more savvy than we were before. I have known Margaret for many, many years. She volunteered at the Poppy Reserve. Prior to that, she taught school in Lancaster. And she's been our PermDia president for how many years, Margaret?
Since 2010.
Since 2010. She is an extremely knowledgeable woman, and she has put together a great presentation on a very important lady, a lady that I did not know personally, but I can say I met her one time. Anyway, without further ado, Margaret, this is Margaret Ryan.
I don't need that. Okay. So I'll turn it.
I know, I'll turn it off.
Okay.
Turn it off.
Okay. All right. So you can hear me just like this, or do I need to turn something on? It's okay. All right. Thank you very much for having me. Speak to you tonight. It got me going on putting together some information that I already had about Jane, as well as I have a subscription to Ancestry, and so I went online because I wanted to verify some of the information I already had by looking up census records and other records, and so I did that, so I'm really pleased about that. Also, the information that I used to put this together is online, and I'll give you the source for that when I get done tonight. So,
is that better?
yeah. Jane Seymour Pinheiro was an absolutely remarkable person. I have boundless admiration for her and everything she was able to accomplish. Oops. Oh. Am I pushing the wrong thing, Mac? Okay. Thank you. So it's this one I push to go forward?
That's forward. The upper one's
Is
backward.
back.
Oh, you're pushing the laser.
Oh,
The middle one.
okay.
Middle one's forward.
Okay, thank you. She was a self-taught artist and botanist and who became a nationally recognized wildflower artist. She was an ardent conservationist and committed Antelope Valley community activist. Oops, there we go. She was a resident of the Antelope Valley from 1941 to 1978 and spent those 35 plus years studying, documenting, drawing, and painting the wildflowers of the Antelope Valley and adjacent areas, including up into this area too. Here's one of her paintings, it's Gilia and poppies. Often when she would do a painting with numerous flowers in it, at the bottom of the matting, she would write down the names of the flowers, which is tremendous for us to be able to see. And that's a Joshua tree. I think she had a real knack for painting Joshua trees. She was a remarkable mover and shaker. She was involved with political issues both locally and statewide, and she's shown in this picture with the first Governor Brown, with Pat Brown. I had a really thrilling thing happen to me. I was up in Sacramento doing a little bit of lobbying and for the the California State Park Foundation. And I did a tour of the governor's mansion while I was up there. And they were taking us through the part of the mansion where Pat Brown and his family actually lived. And right outside the family dining room, I saw this picture. And I thought, oh my goodness, that looks familiar. And then sure enough, it's Jane Pinheiro's. So I imagine on one of her trips up there to talk to the governor, she brought him a present and he hung it in his home, and it's still there. These are some of the organizations she belonged to. She was president of the Quartz Hill and Lancaster Women's Club, a founder of the Quartz Hill Almond Blossom Festival, founder of Allied Arts Association, and as you can see, many other local organizations. She helped to found Saddleback Butte State Park in 1960, I think that's right, and of course the Poppy Reserve, and then many of the other wildlife sanctuaries that are in this area now and part of LA County Parks and Recreation. Here she is at the dedication of the Devil's Punch Bowl, Los Angeles County Park, and one of the wildlife sanctuaries, and at Alpine, the dedication of the Alpine Sanctuary, 1964. That's her sitting there. And of course, her greatest accomplishment was to work with the Lancaster Women's Club and other organizations to found the Poppy Reserve, which was dedicated as a bicentennial project in April of 1976. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. These are some of the awards that were given to Jane. These are national awards, and these organizations flew her back to Washington and New York to receive the award, especially the prestigious Oak Leaf Service Award from the Nature Conservancy. Her achievements are all the more remarkable, considering that she was not an affluent, politically connected socialite from a well-known family. In fact, she had all of this on a very limited income. Her husband, Joe, was a blue-collar worker who made no more than $8,000 per year. Jane sold her paintings both to celebrate the importance of local wildflowers, but also for the added income. She was born in 1907 in Denver, Colorado, and per the 1920 census, when she was 12 years old, by that time the family was living in Salt Lake City, Utah. And at that time, the household consisted of her father, mother, and an older sister named Julie. She received her formal education in Salt Lake City, and including obtaining a teaching credential. And in 1925, her father passed away in Salt Lake City when Jane was 18. Between 1925 and 1930, I'm not sure of exactly when, but certainly by 1930, Jane and her mother moved to Pasadena. Now, why they chose Pasadena, I don't know. I'd like to find that out. There must have been a family member there, but I haven't been able to figure that out yet. And they began running a boarding house, which is what many women did if they were suddenly widowed, to make a living. Per the 1930 census, they had 8 lodgers. Somewhere before 1930, Joe Colho Pinheiro was one of their early lodgers. He was Portuguese. He came to the United States from the Azores in 1917. He and Jane were married on September 25th of 1930. In 1935, I found his naturalization papers online, so I know he applied for citizenship in 1935, listing Jane as his wife, and at that time they were still living in Pasadena. And while living in Pasadena, Jane won a ribbon for her artwork at the LA County Fair. So she was already doing, I'm sure, watercolor paintings at that time. In 1941, Joe and Jane moved to the Antelope Valley. Joe got a job working for the famous, or should I say infamous, Pancho Barnes as her dairyman at the Happy Bottom Riding Club. And I laugh when I think about it. Both Pancho and Jane Pinheiro had very strong personalities, and it would have been quite interesting to be in the same room with them and hear them and hear how well they got along. But anyway, of course, that's now on what is now Edwards Air Force Base. By 1945, Joe was no longer working for Pancho, and they moved to Quartz Hill. And this is the little house that they lived in, and it's still there. It's on Avenue M. It's up a little hill, and the address is 4819 West Avenue M, and that's the address she was putting on her business cards. Now, how long they lived there, I'm not sure, but I know they lived in Quartz Hill a very long time, and I'm not sure if it was all the time was in this house. But she certainly was living there towards the end of her life. Here's her studio inside the house, and her work table. She was a multi-talented artist. She was a sculptor, and you can see her, she's working right there with clay. A watercolorist, pen and ink artist. She produced woodblock prints, crewel work, and she wove baskets and wrote articles for local papers and for the LA Times. Here's one of the articles, How to Weave a Basket by Jane S. Pinheiro. I'm not sure what newspaper this was in. And there's some of her hand-woven basketry. And this is her crewel work coat, which was on display when the History Museum in Lancaster did a display, history display of some of different items from the Lancaster Women's Club, associated with the Lancaster Women's Club. Here's a close-up. And here she is wearing a crocheted shawl that she crocheted herself. This is an article that was published in the LA Times where she wrote an interesting, lighthearted article about how she and Joe built a little patio, a shaded patio with bamboo in their backyard. Joshua trees particularly intrigued Jane, and she began making many pen and ink drawings of them. And I have one right here. Lynn Dupratt, who had hoped to be with us tonight and wasn't able to. This is hers, and she let me bring it here tonight. And I'll put it out on the table. So one of the really fun things about many of her Joshua trees is that they feature a whimsical touch and included hidden faces. So take a look at that and see if you can spot. There are 3 hidden faces. Think you see them? Well, here they are. This little guy down here. And here.
Oh, I see them. Do you see them now?
And I put close-ups in too. Now, when I look at this, I'm theorizing that this is actually a block print, because she did do block prints, and I believe that's what this is. And here's a picture of her sketching in the desert. I think it may be Edwards Air Force Base. Looks like a dry lake in the background. I'm not sure. And another one of her sketching out in the desert. Great classic car, huh? She was a founding member of the Allied Arts Association, and this is the part where I'd hope that Lynn would be able to speak tonight, because the lady on the left is Juanita Carruthers, and she was Lynn's mother. She owned the Carruthers Art Gallery, which was in the old Station 33 firehouse and Cedar Avenue, close to Lancaster Boulevard in downtown Lancaster. The gallery featured the works of local artists, including Jane and some others whose names you would remember, you would recognize. Juanita and Jane were very good friends. And like I said, our Primdia secretary, Lynn Dupratt, is Juanita's daughter. I'm hoping at some future point that you guys can interview Lynn and get her input. So in 1963, together with members of the Lancaster Women's Club, including Dorothy Bolt, who's another famous figure who played a very important role in the establishment of the Poppy Reserve, they established the first Antelope Valley Wildflower Center. Now raise your hand if you remember going to a wildflower center and they had the little jars with water in them. Yeah. And in those days, we picked the flowers and put them in the jars of water, and then they would identify them. And I remember going to these wildflower centers. I was a couple years younger than I am now. And also, they did it up at High Vista in what's now called the Kill Bill Church. And I remember going up there. The ladies up in High Vista did the same thing, which was great for me because I was trying to learn about wildflowers. The location of the centers in the following years included a building on Sierra Highway that they rented, AV Convention Center, the fairgrounds, the Fairmont Church, which I didn't know that, but they did have it. It's now the Fairmont Church, but it was, I think, a store at that time. And Jane's painting were on display along with identified wildflowers in small containers in all of these wildflower centers. Of course, these were the days before it was easy to take photos. And so you can understand how if you really wanted to learn about wildflowers, then they were actually picking them and putting them in little mason jars with water. This information is from Milt Stark's article in the Antelope Valley Reflections, winter 1996, and I have a source for this online. Now, a botanist from UC Davis happened to visit one of the wildflower centers. And after examining Jane's watercolors, he urged the Women's Club to buy as many as possible to preserve them for public view. He declared them to be botanically correct and, quote, really quite a treasure. And this is the Lancaster Women's Club Executive Board. That's Jane in the middle. You could always pick her out. And on the far right is Dorothy Bolt. In 1970, Dorothy, as chairman of the Conservation Committee of the Women's Club, spearheaded a plan to buy Jane's watercolors. Jane agreed to sell 125 of the paintings for $5,000. Dorothy was able to involve 14 other local organizations to form the Wildflower Preservation Committee, an ad hoc committee of the Women's Club. The purpose was to raise the money to buy the paintings. About this time, Jane received a copy of a 5-year study done by the Resources Agency of the California Department of Parks and Recreation, which recommended that the best location for a state park to preserve the state flower was around the Antelope and Fairmont Buttes, 14 miles west of Lancaster. In view of this recommendation, the Wildflower Preservation Committee decided that once they had raised the money to buy the paintings, their next objective was to raise money to buy land for a poppy park. Dorothy Bolt and the Wildflower Foundation contacted the California State Parks Foundation, and the foundation immediately set a poppy park as their highest priority. Money was raised through many means. I Gave to Save decals that were designed by Jane. Pennies for Poppies was a local school initiative that eventually went statewide. Land deeds, where you contributed a certain amount of money, you got a deed. Also, the California State Parks Foundation got corporate donations of $350,000. Land acquisitions first was 1,700 plus acres purchased on Antelope Butte. 990 acres were purchased from the Munns family. And Forrest Godey made 2 large donations of land. In April of 1976, the Poppy Reserve was founded. The caption, this is from Antelope Valley Press, I believe, and the caption says, "Something to smile about. Herbert Rhodes, director of the California Department of Parks and Recreation, accepts deed to wildflower land from William Penn Mott, Jr., president of the California State Park Foundation. Jane Pinheiro, longtime advocate of the Poppy Park, approves." Ceremonies were held April 24th, 1976, when the first 2,000 acres of the park were dedicated. Fundraising will continue for additional land and a nature center on the park site. This is the program for the dedication. Of course, that's Jane's artwork. Sadly, Jane passed not long after the Poppy Reserve became a reality, but isn't it great that she did live long enough to see it become, to see it actually get dedicated and become something that she could remember. This is her obituary from the LA Times. And not long after that, in 1981, they were able to break ground on the Interpretive Center, which was named after Jane, the Jane Pinheiro Interpretive Center, which is the visitor center today at the Poppy Reserve. And see if I can do this. Yeah, this is Joe Pinheiro. He was still alive at the time of the dedication. This is Dorothy Bolt, right here. Here's another photo from that day, April 1982. This is Joe at the dedication. He was Jane's husband and biggest fan. He was able to attend the Interpretive Center dedication, but sadly passed away shortly after. This is a plaque dedicated to Jane at the Interpretive Center at the Poppy Reserve. And this bust of Jane is now at the Poppy Reserve. And every year, the paintings that were purchased by the Wildflower Preservation Foundation were donated to the state park, and they've acquired more since then. So there's quite a good collection of Jane's paintings there. And every year, there's an alcove where they're displayed, and we bring out different paintings every year to display. There's usually a theme. I can't recall the theme this year, Janet. Do you remember?
No, sorry.
Yeah, I don't. You know, I meant to mention Janet is the vice president of PrimDia, and boy, has she been working hard because of the new POS system. So, but she hung in there, and we got it working, and now it's working really well. But it's long hours and much worry later. So after Jane passed, there were 2 great events that I was able to attend that celebrated her work. She donated her estate to the Theodore Payne Foundation, which is a very important society for native plants. They have a great nursery in Sunland and a lot of online sources as well. And they have a little art studio, and they had her block prints on display, which was really interesting. And this is an example of the block prints. She made her Christmas cards out of them. So this is a Christmas card that she made using that technique of block printing. I'll set it over here so you can take a look at it later. And then really exciting was that the Huntington Library in San Marino put together a show called When They Were Wild. There were 6, I believe, artists included that are all people that are renowned for painting native California wildflowers, and Jane was included in the show. These are two of her paintings that were loaned to the Huntington by the Theodore Payne Foundation for the show, and there were others there as well. And to end, I'm just going to go through some of her beautiful paintings. We sell some of these at the Poppy Reserve, as well as we have note cards. I think we're raffling off a note card set tonight. They're both artistically beautiful and botanically correct. Bush poppy, and of course, a Schultzia californica. And I want to end with this quote from Adele Taylor, who knew Jane. Innumerable lives have been made richer and more meaningful because she walked among us. And an artist named Jan Siamas made this lovely painting of Joe and Jane. So if you go to our website, www.primdia.org, and scroll down to About Us, I have several different articles about Jane that are linked there, including the one that I quoted from Milt that was written by Milt Stark. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. We didn't give her a chance to answer any questions.
Oh, yeah.
Does anyone have any questions?
We should give them the hours for the Poppy Reserve
Okay.
Visitor Center.
Yes, all right. I'll let you do that. I don't
Okay.
need this mic.
Okay. So the Visitor Center at the Poppy Reserve is open from 10 to 4.
Margaret, you gotta move closer.
10 to 4, Monday through Friday, and 9 to 5 on the weekends. So we have a great gift shop and displays, all kinds of Poppy-related cute stuff to buy. So come do your Christmas shopping. We're open until Mother's Day.
And then, Margaret?
Yes.
Do you guys have copies of all of her prints out there?
No.
You can purchase, or how is that?
No, we only have copies of a few that were selected that people thought might have interest to the general public.
About 10 or 15 different ones, Janet?
15, I think.
Yeah, and they're in 2 different sizes too. And they're matted also.
But we also do have note cards with her prints on them.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we decided that we would bring tonight, and that's why you have tickets. Janet, do you want to do the ticket drawing? While Janet is coming up, there's just a couple of comments that I remember, although I only met Jane one time. I was told by Dorothy Bolt that when Jane was part of the committee, you didn't need the committee. So that sort of tells you a little bit about Jane. And of course, Dorothy Bolt was also a force of nature. All right, Janet.
I was just checking. I think there were a couple of people. Did everybody get a ticket? Did you get Joe and Debbie?
No, I didn't.
You got one? Oh, okay.
Yes, I see a hand up. Barbara?
I just wanted to mention that the Antelope Valley Rural Museum, which is on the fairgrounds, has a very, very nice display of Jane Pinheiro's work.
Yes, thank you, Barbara. I'm glad you mentioned that. It is wonderful, yes.
And one more thing, in April we're doing a display of local wildflowers. So I need to get in contact with a picture of the Poppy Festival or Poppy Reserve. So anyway, should be good.
Okay. Now, the wildflowers actually are beginning to bloom. There's Montelopia on Soledad.
Yes, yes.
There, I saw some large yellow desert primrose along Sierra Highway just out of Roseman, and I saw Mojave Loco weed today.
Would you like to? I've shaken and shaken and shaken. So pull out your ticket. we'll draw one, and
Okay, I'm looking.
you know what?
I'm not
I can
looking.
probably make myself heard.
Okay.
So, okay, get ready, I'll read the number. Probably only need to give like the last 3 digits. 0, this is the last 3, 040.
040.
Oh, okay.
Gail,
Bring
very
it
good,
up.
very good. Well,
You don't have to get up.
all right, well, unless you have other questions or comments, are there other comments or questions? Well, again, Margaret, thank you very much. A great presentation. There are things over here on the table that you may want to look. She has the original Jane Pinheiro that is on loan from Lynn Pratt and some of the articles. So please take a minute and take a look. And again, thank you for coming.